March 15, 1995. The Chinese theater premiere. Vincent Chen watched from the press pit as mega-producer Harrison Wolf publicly refused to shake Jackie Chan's hand, calling him just another chop-socky nobody. Wolf controlled 40% of Hollywood's action films. Jackie Chan was fighting for his American breakthrough. Vincent had his camera rolling. What happened next lasted 8 seconds. Jackie's response was quiet, measured, delivered in perfect English with a smile that never reached his eyes. No one in that crowd understood what they'd just witnessed. Within 6 months, Wolf's empire crumbled. 3 major deals collapsed. His top stars fled to other agencies. The man who'd made and destroyed careers for 2 decades found himself unemployable. Hollywood whispered about it for years. How did Jackie Chan, an outsider with broken English, systematically dismantle one of the industry's most powerful predators with nothing but 8 seconds and a smile? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Vincent Chen's finger trembled on the camera's record button as those 8 seconds unfolded in slow motion before him. The Chinese theater's red carpet buzzed with the usual premiere chaos, flashbulbs popping, reporters shouting questions, the controlled pandemonium of Hollywood royalty parading for the masses. But in that moment, everything else faded to white noise. Harrison Wolf stood there in his $1,000 tuxedo, his hand deliberately withdrawn, that trademark smirk plastered across his face. The same expression Vincent had seen him wear when crushing dreams in boardrooms across the city. Wolf's entourage, studio executives, yes-men, and hangers-on, chuckled nervously, unsure whether to join in the humiliation or pretend they hadn't witnessed it. Jackie Chan didn't flinch, didn't break eye contact, didn't let that manufactured smile slip for even a microsecond. "Mr. Wolf," Jackie said, his voice carrying just far enough for Vincent's sensitive boom mic to catch every syllable. "I understand. Some hands are too dirty to shake." The crowd's laughter died instantly. A few reporters sensed blood in the water and pushed closer, but Jackie was already moving past Wolf, graciously greeting the next person in line as if nothing had happened. Professional, unruffled, devastating. Vincent watched Wolf's face cycle through confusion, then comprehension, then something approaching fear. For just a moment, the mask slipped, and Vincent saw what lurked underneath, a predator realizing he just underestimated his prey. "Get closer," Vincent's instincts screamed. This is the story. But his legs wouldn't move. 28 years old, 3 years into his career as an entertainment journalist, and Vincent Chen was paralyzed by the weight of what he'd just witnessed. He knew Wolf's reputation, the whispered stories about destroyed careers, about actors and directors who'd crossed him and never worked again. The unspoken understanding that certain truths stayed buried if you wanted to survive in this town. Vincent's camera kept rolling, but he stepped back into the crowd instead of forward. The moment for courage passed him by like a taxi in the rain. The rest of the premiere played out according to script. Speeches were made, hands were shaken, deals were whispered about in corners while champagne flutes clinked. Vincent documented it all with mechanical precision, but his mind kept returning to those 8 seconds. Jackie's calm, Wolf's barely contained rage as he glad-handed his way through the rest of the evening. 3 days later, Vincent sat in his cramped West Hollywood apartment, staring at the footage on his editing bay. He'd watched it 17 times, each viewing revealing new details. The way Jackie's eyes had tracked something, or someone, in the crowd before speaking. How Wolf's security detail had shifted position afterward, suddenly alert. The faces of other industry players who'd witnessed the exchange, their expressions ranging from shock to what looked almost like satisfaction. Vincent reached for his phone twice to call his editor at Variety. This was exactly the kind of inside baseball that readers craved, career-defining stuff. Both times his hand stopped short of dialing. Some hands are too dirty to shake. What did Jackie know that the rest of them didn't? The first domino fell on a Tuesday. Vincent was grabbing coffee near the Variety offices when he overheard 2 studio executives whispering about Wolf's latest disaster. Dragon's Fire, his $100 million summer tentpole, had just lost its director and 2 leads in the span of 48 hours. creative differences according to the trades, but Vincent caught fragments of the real story in coffee shop conversations and industry parties. Won't work with him anymore. Something about the Chan thing. Lost his touch, maybe. By the end of the month, it was open season. Agents who'd feared Wolf for decades suddenly found their spines. Directors started sharing stories about his on-set behavior. Actors spoke off the record about inappropriate conduct and professional sabotage. Not to reporters, Vincent noticed that detail. The stories spread organically, person to person, like a virus designed to destroy one specific target. Vincent's footage remained locked away in his apartment, unwatched since that first week. Every instinct told him to investigate, to connect the dots between Jackie's 8-second verbal execution and Wolf's systematic destruction. But every time he considered it, he remembered the fear in Wolf's eyes, the predator realizing he was prey. And if Harrison Wolf, who'd ruled Hollywood for 20 years, could be taken down so completely, so precisely, what chance did a freelance journalist have if he stumbled into something he wasn't supposed to see? 6 months after the premiere, Vincent watched from the same coffee shop as Wolf's Bentley got repossessed outside CAA. The once untouchable producer looked 20 years older, his empire reduced to ashes and lawsuits. A few other industry veterans witnessed the scene, but nobody seemed surprised. They watched with the quiet satisfaction of people seeing justice finally served. Vincent realized he wasn't the only one who'd been keeping secrets. The difference was, everyone else seemed to know which side they were on. Vincent still had that coffee shop footage. 27 years later, he could see Wolf's face through the rain-streaked window of his Chinatown apartment, captured in freeze frame on his laptop screen. The timestamp read March 15, 1996, the day the Bentley got repossessed. He'd been digitizing old tapes again, a habit that had become both penance and obsession in his years of exile. The steam from his instant ramen curled up toward the ceiling, carrying the smell of artificial beef flavoring and regret. Outside, Grant Avenue hummed with its evening rhythm, tourists hunting for knockoff designer bags, locals arguing in Cantonese over mahjong games, the eternal dance of a neighborhood caught between authenticity and performance. Vincent's fingers found the scar on his left hand without conscious thought, the raised line where a piece of his old editing equipment had caught him during the move from his Beverly Hills office. 2008, the year his investigation into studio accounting practices had earned him a lawsuit, a blacklist, and a one-way ticket to irrelevance. He'd told himself it was about justice, about exposing the truth. Really, it had been about guilt, 27 years of it, festering like an infected wound. Bah, you're watching that old stuff again. Vincent minimized the window as his daughter Lily emerged from the apartment's single bedroom, her nurse scrubs rumpled from a double shift at UCSF. She moved with the careful efficiency of someone perpetually exhausted, dark circles under eyes that held too much of her mother's beauty for Vincent's comfort. At 26, she carried herself like someone much older, aged by responsibilities that should have been his. Just organizing files, he said, closing the laptop. How was work? Lily dropped onto the threadbare couch beside him, stealing a piece of his ramen with chopsticks that appeared from nowhere, a skill inherited from her mother, the ability to materialize food-stealing utensils at will. The memory stung with familiar sharpness. Mrs. Patterson in 4C asked about you again, she said, studying his face. She wants to know if you'd look at some old family videos. Her grandson tried to convert them, but I'm not taking clients right now. We need the money, Ba. The words hung between them like smoke. Vincent watched his daughter's reflection in the dark window, saw how she'd unconsciously straightened her shoulders, preparing for another fight about pride and pragmatism. She'd been fighting that fight since she was 16, when cancer had claimed her mother and Vincent's savings simultaneously. I've got the Morrison Project, he said. Documentary work pays better than family videos. Lily's laugh held no humor. That hipster filmmaker who's 3 months behind on payments? That Morrison Project? Vincent's phone buzzed against the coffee table, saving him from answering. Unknown number, which usually meant bill collectors or wrong numbers. He almost ignored it until he recognized the voice on his voicemail. Mr. Chen? This is David Kim from Pacific Digital Archives. I have something that belonged to your wife. Vincent's chopsticks clattered against his bowl. Sarah had been dead for 8 years. The archives company had liquidated her documentary equipment, along with everything else they'd lost to medical debt. What could possibly remain? Lily was watching him with that expression she'd inherited from her mother, the one that suggested she could read his thoughts like subtitles. "What is it?" "Probably nothing," Vincent said, but his hands were already reaching for his jacket. "I'll be back in an hour. Bah." Lily's voice carried a warning. "Whatever it is, we can't afford—" "It's about your mother." The words stopped her protest mid-sentence. Vincent kissed the top of her head, breathing in the antiseptic smell that always clung to her scrubs, the scent of other people's emergencies. She was his anchor to the present, the reason he got up each morning and pretended the past didn't matter. But as he stepped into the Chinatown evening, Vincent felt the familiar pull of old mysteries. The footage of Wolf's downfall wasn't the only secret he'd kept locked away. Sarah had been investigating something in those final months before her diagnosis. Something that had made her paranoid about phone calls and careful about who she trusted. She died before finishing it, taking her secrets to the grave. Vincent walked through the neon-lit streets, past herb shops and dim-sum restaurants, past tourists taking selfies with dragons they didn't understand. Above him, windows glowed like amber squares, each one a story, a life, a collection of choices that led to this moment. His reflection caught in a storefront window. 62 years old, hair more salt than pepper, wearing the same jacket he'd owned for a decade. He looked like what he was, a man who'd spent 27 years running from 8 seconds of cowardice. The archive building sat in an industrial district south of Market, its parking lot empty, except for security lights and shadows. Vincent's footsteps echoed as he approached the entrance, each step carrying him further from the safety of his small life and closer to whatever Sarah had left behind. "Some hands are too dirty to shake." Jackie's words followed him into the darkness. Vincent's keycard beeped against the reader, a courtesy from David Kim, who'd left it at the front desk with a note scrawled in hasty handwriting, "Storage Unit 47B. Found this during our digital migration. Thought you should see it first." The hallway stretched ahead like a fluorescent-lit tunnel, lined with identical metal doors that reminded Vincent of morgue drawers. His footsteps echoed off concrete walls, each sound amplifying his heartbeat until he could feel his pulse in his temples. Storage Unit 47B sat at the end of the corridor, its lock already disengaged. Inside, a single cardboard box waited on a metal shelf. No bigger than a shoebox, labeled in Sarah's careful handwriting, V. Chen, Personal, 2015. Vincent's hands trembled as he lifted the lid. Sarah had died in 2016. Whatever was inside, she'd assembled it during her final months, when the treatments weren't working, and they'd both known she was running out of time to finish whatever had been consuming her. The box contained a single external hard drive, sleek and black, with a yellow sticky note attached, "Play the video first. Then decide." S. Vincent almost laughed at the simplicity of it. After 8 years of wondering what secrets Sarah had taken with her, the answer fit in his palm. He slipped the drive into his jacket pocket and headed back to his car, the weight of it pressing against his chest like a second heartbeat. The drive back to Chinatown blurred past in a haze of streetlights and anticipation. Vincent's apartment felt smaller when he returned, Lily's presence on the couch like a reminder of everything he had to lose. She'd fallen asleep watching Netflix, still in her scrubs, an empty bowl balanced on her chest. He covered her with a blanket and retreated to the kitchen table with his laptop. The hard drive contained dozens of files, but one sat prominently at the top for Vincent. "Watch me first, MP4. Sarah's face filled the screen, gaunt from chemotherapy, but her eyes still sharp with the intelligence that had made her the best documentary filmmaker he'd ever known. She was sitting in their old apartment, the one they'd lost after her medical bills destroyed their savings. Vincent recognized the bookshelf behind her, the framed photo of their wedding day visible over her shoulder. "If you're watching this, I'm gone, and someone finally decided you needed to see what I found." Sarah's voice was weaker than he remembered, but her words carried the same precision that had characterized her work. "I know you think I was being paranoid in those last months. About the phone calls, the people following me. You were trying to protect me from stress, but Vincent, I wasn't paranoid. I was careful. The camera angle shifted, and Vincent realized Sarah had been recording this in secret, probably while he was at one of his freelance editing jobs. Remember the Jackie Chan footage? The premiere in '95? You think you were the only one recording that night, but you weren't. I was there too, working the secondary unit for Entertainment Weekly. I saw what you saw. More importantly, I saw what happened after. Vincent's chest tightened. Sarah had never mentioned being at that premiere. You kept that footage locked away for 27 years, Vincent. But other people have been collecting pieces of that puzzle. What happened to Harrison Wolf wasn't random. It was orchestrated, and the person behind it has been waiting a very long time to complete their revenge. Sarah leaned closer to the camera, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. Check the other files. The pattern goes back decades. The Chan incident was just the beginning. Someone has been systematically destroying careers, manipulating the industry from the shadows. And Vincent, they've been using your footage as evidence. The blacklisting, the lawsuits that destroyed your career, none of it was random. You were never the investigator. You were always the target. The video cut to black, leaving Vincent staring at his own reflection in the laptop screen. His coffee had gone cold, but he didn't notice. Around him, the apartment felt suddenly exposed, as if invisible eyes were watching from every shadow. With shaking fingers, he opened the next file, a spreadsheet containing names, dates, and incidents stretching back 30 years. Harrison Wolf was just one entry among hundreds. Producers, directors, studio executives, all brought down by scandals that had seemed unconnected at the time. But mapped out chronologically, they formed a pattern as precise as a surgical strike. At the bottom of the list, Vincent found his own name. Next to it, Sarah had written, "Final phase initiated 2008. Subject isolated and contained." Awaiting activation, Vincent's phone buzzed. Unknown number. This time, he answered. "Hello, Vincent." The voice was calm, familiar in a way that made his skin crawl. "I think it's time we met." Vincent's finger hovered over the hang-up button, his entire body frozen except for the tremor in his hand. The voice on the phone carried the weight of decades, patient as stone. "Don't hang up. We have so much to discuss." "Who is this?" Vincent's whisper barely escaped his throat. "Someone who knew Sarah very well, someone who's been watching you try to piece together her final project." A pause, filled with the sound of Vincent's own breathing. "Someone who was there the night Jackie Chan destroyed Harrison Wolf's career." The line went dead. Vincent stared at the phone until the screen dimmed, then snapped the laptop shut with shaking hands. The apartment felt different now, exposed, vulnerable. Every shadow could hide a camera. Every creak of settling wood could mask footsteps. He moved to the window and peered through the blinds at Grant Avenue below, searching for anyone who seemed too interested in his building. Nothing. Just late-night commuters and the usual collection of insomniacs nursing coffee in the 24-hour noodle shop across the street. "Bah?" Lily's voice came from behind him, thick with sleep. "Everything okay?" Vincent spun around too quickly, his guilt written across his face like subtitles. Lily stood in the kitchen doorway, studying him with those too perceptive eyes. She'd inherited Sarah's ability to read people, to sense when the ground was shifting beneath their feet. "Fine, just work stuff." He forced casualness into his voice. "Go back to sleep." But Lily was already moving toward him, her nurse instincts activated by whatever she saw in his expression. "You look like you've seen a ghost." What was in that box? Nothing important. Old equipment. "Bah." She crossed her arms, and Vincent saw Sarah in that gesture, the same stubborn set to her shoulders when she knew she was being lied to. "We've been through too much for bullshit." Vincent's phone buzzed again. Text message from the same unknown number, the Golden Dragon. "Tomorrow 8 p.m. Come alone, or Lily finds out what really happened to her mother." Ice water flooded Vincent's veins. His hands shook as he deleted the message, but not before Lily caught sight of his expression. "Dad, you're scaring me. What's going on?" "Nothing." The word came out too sharp, too defensive. Vincent tried to soften it with a smile that felt like broken glass. "I just need some air." He grabbed his jacket and headed for the door, but Lily stepped into his path. Whatever this is about, we handle it together. That's how we've always. Not this time. Vincent's voice carried an edge that made Lily step back. He hated himself for it, hated the fear he saw flash across her face. But the alternative was worse. Trust me, please. Vincent pushed past her before she could respond, leaving behind the smell of antiseptic and the weight of her worried gaze. The hallway outside their apartment stretched like an accusation, each step taking him further from the only good thing left in his life. The night air hit him like a slap, carrying the mingled scents of exhaust and star anise from the herb shops. Vincent walked without direction, muscle memory guiding him through streets he'd navigated for 15 years of exile, past the tourist traps and authentic hole-in-the-wall restaurants, past the old men playing Shang-Chi under streetlights, past the ghosts of every choice that had led him to this moment. His phone rang again. This time he let it go to voicemail, then played the message with the phone pressed against his ear like a secret. "Vincent, this is Marcus Webb." The name hit him like a physical blow. Marcus, his old editor at Variety, the one who'd tried to convince him not to pursue the studio accounting story, the one who'd gone silent after Vincent's career imploded. "I just got a very interesting phone call. Someone asking questions about our old friend Harrison Wolf, about what really happened at that premiere." A pause, heavy with meaning. "Vincent, whatever you're involved in now, walk away. Some stones should stay unturned." The message ended, leaving Vincent standing alone on a street corner with the weight of 27 years pressing down on his shoulders. Marcus sounded terrified, not just worried but genuinely afraid, and Marcus had survived 3 decades in Hollywood by knowing exactly which battles not to fight. Vincent tried calling him back, but the number went straight to voicemail. He tried texting. No response. Within 10 minutes, Marcus Webb had vanished as completely as if he'd never existed. The Golden Dragon restaurant sat 6 blocks away, its neon sign visible from where Vincent stood. Tomorrow, 8 p.m., come alone, or Lily finds out what really happened to her mother. Vincent started walking home, each step heavy with the knowledge that his daughter was already in danger, had probably been in danger from the moment he'd opened Sarah's box. Someone had been watching, waiting, orchestrating events with the same surgical precision they'd used to destroy Harrison Wolf. The only question was whether Vincent would have the courage this time to do what he should have done 27 years ago, or if cowardice would claim another life he couldn't afford to lose. Vincent climbed the stairs to his apartment like a man ascending a gallows, each step weighted with the certainty that everything was about to change. The hallway smelled of cooking oil and old secrets, familiar scents that had once meant safety but now felt like a trap closing around him. Lily was waiting at the kitchen table, still in her scrubs, Sarah's hard drive connected to her laptop. The screen showed a frozen frame of his wife's face, and Vincent's heart stopped. "Interesting bedtime story, Ba." Lily's voice could have cut glass. "Want to explain why Ma was investigating you before she died?" Vincent's mouth opened and closed without sound. On the screen, Sarah's gaunt features stared back at him like an accusation from the grave. How much had Lily seen? How much did she know? "That's not... It's complicated. Try me." Lily's fingers drummed against the table in a rhythm Vincent recognized, the same nervous tell Sarah had displayed when cornering a reluctant interview subject. "I'm a grown woman, and apparently someone thinks I need to know what really happened to my mother. So start talking." Vincent sank into the chair across from her, feeling every one of his 62 years settle into his bones. The apartment that had been his refuge for 15 years suddenly felt like a crime scene, every corner hiding evidence of his failures. "Your mother was... She found some things about my past, about why we really lost everything. The lawsuit, the blacklisting. You said it was because you exposed studio corruption." "That's what I thought." Vincent's voice came out as a whisper, but Sarah discovered it was orchestrated. Someone wanted me destroyed, and they used my own investigation as the weapon. Lily leaned back in her chair, processing this information with the same methodical precision she applied to medical diagnoses. Vincent watched her face cycle through confusion, anger, and something worse, disappointment so profound it felt like a physical blow. "How long have you known?" "I found out tonight, when I watched the video." "Bullshit." The profanity sounded wrong in Lily's mouth, too harsh for someone who spent her days healing people. Ma was paranoid for months before she died. You knew she was investigating something. Vincent's hands found the scar on his palm, worrying the raised flesh like a prayer bead. I thought it was the medication, the stress. She was seeing conspiracies everywhere, talking about people following her, phone calls at strange hours. I was trying to protect her from what? The truth? Lily's laugh held no humor. God, Ba. Even when she was dying, you were lying to her. The accusation hung between them like smoke from an extinguished candle. Vincent wanted to defend himself, to explain that everything he'd done had been to shield his family from the consequences of his cowardice. But the words crumbled in his throat because Lily was right. He'd been lying for 27 years, to Sarah, to Lily, to himself. There's more, he said finally. Someone called tonight. They want to meet. Lily's eyes narrowed. The person who sent that text about Ma? Vincent nodded, hating himself for the fear he saw bloom across his daughter's features. She was already calculating odds, preparing for the worst-case scenario. Another skill inherited from her mother, the ability to function under pressure while everything fell apart around her. We call the police. And tell them what? That someone wants to discuss ancient Hollywood gossip? Vincent shook his head. This goes deeper than we understand. The people involved, they've been playing a long game for decades. Police reports become public record. Evidence disappears. Witnesses change their stories. You're talking like this is some movie thriller, B.A. This is real life. That's exactly what makes it dangerous. Vincent's phone buzzed against the table. Both of them stared at it like a coiled snake. Unknown number. Vincent's finger trembled as he accepted the call and put it on speaker. Good evening, Lily. The voice was different this time. Younger, female, but carrying the same patient menace. I hope you're enjoying your family reunion. Lily's face went pale. Vincent reached for her hand across the table, but she pulled away, her medical training kicking in as she scanned their surroundings for threats. My father and I were just discussing tomorrow's meeting, she said, her voice steadier than Vincent felt. Maybe I should come along. Oh, you misunderstand. This conversation is the meeting. Vincent and I have already said everything we need to say. Tomorrow is just theater. What do you want? Vincent's question came out strangled. Justice. Closure. The ending to a story that began 27 years ago, when you chose to be a coward instead of a hero. A pause filled with breathing that didn't belong to Vincent or Lily. Your wife understood. She spent her final months trying to undo the damage you'd caused by staying silent. She failed, but she came close enough to worry some very powerful people. The line went dead. Lily stared at the silent phone, then at Vincent, her face cycling through emotions too complex for him to read. When she finally spoke, her voice carried a finality that made his chest ache. Whatever you're hiding, Ba, people died for it. Ma died for it. And now someone's coming to collect. Vincent stared at his daughter's accusation, the words hanging in the air like a death sentence. Ma died for it. The phrase echoed in his mind, colliding with memories he'd spent 8 years trying to suppress. Sarah's final months, her increasing paranoia, the way she'd flinch whenever the phone rang. Lily, that's not... He stopped mid-sentence as the pieces clicked into place with devastating clarity. Sarah's late-night phone calls, her insistence on checking locks twice, the way she'd started looking over her shoulder in parking garages. It hadn't been paranoia at all. She knew, Vincent whispered, the realization hitting him like a physical blow. Jesus Christ, she knew, and I called her crazy. Lily's expression shifted from anger to something approaching pity. What are you talking about? Vincent's hands shook as he opened Sarah's video file again, but this time he noticed details that had escaped him before. The timestamp showed it was recorded at 3:17 a.m. The bookshelf behind her held gaps where certain volumes had been removed, the same books on Hollywood history that Vincent now realized had probably contained her research. Most telling was what he could see of her desk in the corner of the frame. Neat stacks of papers, photographs, what looked like surveillance equipment. She wasn't sick, he said, his voice barely audible. I mean, she was dying, but her mind... She was investigating, really investigating, and I kept telling the doctors she was having paranoid episodes from the medication. The memory crashed over him with sickening clarity. Dr. Martinez, concerned about Sarah's delusions. Vincent nodding gravely, explaining how his wife had become convinced people were following her. The prescription for anti-anxiety medication that Sarah had refused to take. Her tears when she realized her own husband thought she was losing her grip on reality. Bah? Lily's voice seemed to come from very far away. She tried to tell me. Vincent's words came out in a rush now, 27 years of self-deception crumbling like a dam. The last few weeks, she kept saying someone was watching the apartment. She wanted to install security cameras. I thought it was the cancer, the fear of dying making her paranoid. But she was trying to protect us. Vincent stood abruptly, pacing to the window and back like a caged animal. She died thinking I didn't believe her, thinking I'd abandoned her to fight this alone. Fight what alone? Whatever this is, whoever's been pulling strings since 1995. Vincent gestured helplessly at the laptop screen. Your mother spent her final months trying to complete an investigation I was too much of a coward to finish, and I sedated her for it. Lily was quiet for a long moment, studying her father with clinical detachment. When she finally spoke, her voice carried a new edge. The night she died, you said she was peaceful, that she went in her sleep. Vincent's blood turned to ice. She did. The hospice nurse confirmed. What time? Lily, why are you... What time did Ma die? Vincent closed his eyes, remembering the worst night of his life. Around 3 a.m. I'd fallen asleep in the chair next to her bed. When I woke up, she was gone. And you were asleep for how long? I don't know, maybe 2 hours? The nurse said it was common that families often step away or fall asleep just before the end. She said it was like Sarah was giving me permission to... That's bullshit, and you know it. Lily's voice cut through his rationalization like a scalpel. Ma fought that cancer for 18 months. She wasn't the type to quietly slip away. She would have woken you up, said goodbye properly. The apartment seemed to contract around Vincent as the implication of his daughter's words sank in. Sarah, who had planned every detail of her life with obsessive precision. Sarah, who had left detailed instructions for her funeral, her estate, even which photos to display at the service. Sarah, who would never have left him without a final conversation. You're saying someone... He couldn't finish the sentence. I'm saying Ma was investigating people powerful enough to destroy careers spanning decades, people who thought she was getting too close to something. And the night she died, you happened to fall into the deepest sleep of your life. Lily's medical training was evident in her tone, calm, clinical, devastating. How often did you fall asleep during those final weeks? Never. I barely slept at all. I was terrified I'd miss... Vincent's voice trailed off as understanding dawned. Someone drugged me, and while you were unconscious, they made sure Ma's investigation died with her. Vincent's phone buzzed with a text message. This time, neither of them hesitated to read it. Your wife was brilliant, but she underestimated how far we'd go to protect what we've built. Don't make the same mistake. Golden Dragon, 8 p.m. tomorrow. Come alone, and maybe your daughter gets to live long enough to mourn you properly. Lily looked up from the phone, her face pale but determined. Well, she said quietly, I guess we know who's been collecting. Vincent deleted the text with shaking fingers, but the words had already burned themselves into his mind. Maybe your daughter gets to live long enough to mourn you properly. The casual cruelty of it, the way it reduced Lily to collateral damage in a decades-old game, made his vision blur with rage. We're leaving, he said, standing so abruptly that his chair toppled backward. Right now. Pack whatever you need. We'll drive to L.A., stay with your cousin until... No. Lily's voice stopped him cold. She remained seated, her hands folded on the table with surgical precision. We're not running. They killed your mother, Lily. They'll kill you too. Maybe. Or maybe they're counting on us being too scared to think straight. She gestured to the laptop screen, where Sarah's frozen image seemed to watch them both. Ma didn't run. Even when she knew they were closing in, she kept investigating. She left us this evidence for a reason. Vincent felt something crack inside his chest. The same terrible choice that had haunted him for 27 years was repeating itself. Only this time the stakes weren't his career or reputation, they were his daughter's life. I can't lose you, too. Then don't. Lily leaned forward, and Vincent saw steel in her eyes that reminded him of Sarah at her most determined. But we do this right, together. No more lies, no more protecting me from information I need to survive. Vincent's phone rang. Not a text this time, a full call from the same unknown number. He stared at it, paralyzed, until Lily reached over and answered it herself. This is Lily Chen. Ms. Chen. How refreshing to speak with someone who inherited their mother's courage instead of their father's cowardice. The woman's voice carried a trace of an accent Vincent couldn't place. Midwest, maybe, carefully neutralized by years in Los Angeles. I trust you've had time to process tonight's revelations. Some of them. Lily put the call on speaker, her eyes never leaving Vincent's face. Though I'm still trying to understand why you waited 8 years to contact us. Timing is everything in this business. Your father's exile needed to reach its natural conclusion before the final act could begin. Despair makes people compliant. Vincent found his voice. What do you want? What I've always wanted. For you to finish what you started in 1995. The woman's tone shifted, becoming almost conversational. You see, Vincent, your cowardice that night wasn't just a personal failing. It was a strategic error that rippled through decades. How many careers were destroyed? How many dreams crushed? All because you chose silence over truth. I was nobody. A junior writer at a trade magazine. Even if I'd written about what I saw, you were positioned perfectly to witness Harrison Wolf's downfall, to document the systematic racism that defined an entire era of Hollywood. Instead, you walked away, and that silence became complicity, a pause. Sarah understood this. She spent her final months trying to build the case you should have built 27 years ago. Vincent's hands clenched into fists. Leave my wife out of this. Oh, but she was never out of it. Not once you married her. Every choice you made, every story you didn't write, every truth you buried, it all became part of her legacy, too. The voice carried a note of satisfaction that made Vincent's skin crawl. Did you know she contacted Harrison Wolf's daughter 6 months before she died? Lovely woman. Physical therapist in Portland now, still carries the scars from watching her father's spirit break. Lily leaned closer to the phone. What exactly are you asking my father to do? Tomorrow evening at the Golden Dragon, Vincent will receive everything he needs to complete his original investigation. Updated documentation, new testimony, evidence that will expose not just what happened in 1995, but the network of power that made it possible. He'll finally have his story. And then he publishes it. Every detail, every name, every crime. The woman's voice hardened, the same courage he should have shown 27 years ago. Vincent felt the weight of inevitability settling around him like a burial shroud. And if I refuse, then you'll join your wife in her well-deserved rest, and Lily will inherit the choice that should have been yours. Though I suspect she'll prove more decisive. The line went dead. Lily stared at the silent phone, her medical training evident in the way she checked Vincent's pulse at his wrist, assessed his breathing, cataloged the signs of shock that were probably written across his features. Bah, she said quietly. Whatever happened in 1995, whatever you saw or didn't do, it ends tomorrow night. Vincent nodded, though he wasn't sure if he was agreeing to courage or suicide. For the first time in 27 years, the distinction no longer mattered. What mattered was that Sarah's investigation wouldn't die with her, and neither would their daughter. The Golden Dragon restaurant squatted between a check-cashing business and a shuttered electronics store, like a faded memory of better times. Vincent stood across the street, watching steam curl from the kitchen vents into the October darkness, and wondered if this was how condemned men felt walking to their execution, terrified but somehow relieved that the waiting was finally over. Lily squeezed his arm. You don't have to do this alone. Yes, I do. Vincent checked his watch, 7:58 p.m. Someone's been orchestrating this moment for 27 years. Whatever they want from me, bringing you inside won't change it. Then why am I here? Vincent turned to study his daughter's face, memorizing the determined set of her jaw, the way her mother's fierce intelligence burned behind her eyes. Because if something happens to me, You're the only one left who knows the truth about what they did to Sarah, to Harrison Wolfe, to everyone who got in their way." Across the street, a figure emerged from the restaurant's shadowed entrance. A woman in her 60s, silver hair pulled back severely, wearing a dark coat that suggested money and power carefully understated. She raised her hand in a small wave, and Vincent felt 27 years of mystery coalesce into this single moment of recognition. "Anna Kaplan," he breathed. Lily's grip tightened on his arm. "Who?" "Harrison Wolfe's publicist. She was there that night in 1995, standing right next to me when it happened." Vincent's mind raced backward through the years, remembering how Anna had vanished from Hollywood within weeks of the incident, her A-list client roster scattered to other agencies like leaves in a hurricane. I thought her career died with Harrison's. But she didn't disappear. She went underground. Anna Kaplan crossed the street with the measured pace of someone accustomed to making others wait. Up close, Vincent could see that the years had carved deep lines around her eyes, but her gaze remained sharp as a scalpel. When she smiled, it held no warmth. "Vincent, you look exactly like what I'd expect from 15 years of exile." She glanced at Lily with professional assessment. "And you must be Sarah's daughter. You have her eyes. Same burning need to fix what's broken." "You killed my mother," Lily said quietly. "I ensured her suffering ended before she could cause more damage." "Yes." Anna's matter-of-fact tone made the admission more chilling than any dramatic confession. "Sarah was brilliant, but she underestimated what I'd built from the ashes of my old life, what I'd sacrificed to build it." Vincent found his voice. "What do you want?" "Justice. For Harrison. For everyone whose career ended that night, because you chose to protect the system instead of the victim." Anna reached into her coat and withdrew a thick manila envelope. "Your original story about the incident, the one you wrote and never published." Vincent's blood turned cold. "That's impossible. I destroyed that draft." "You tried to delete it from your computer. But Harrison's daughter Rebecca was quite resourceful with data recovery, back when she still believed her father might get justice through legal channels." Anna's smile turned predatory. She spent 20 years collecting evidence, testimony from other victims, financial records proving systematic discrimination, security footage from premieres where similar incidents occurred. "Rebecca Wolfe," Vincent whispered, pieces clicking into place. "She's been helping you." "She was helping me, until she realized that legal justice was impossible. Too many powerful people protected, too much money at stake." Anna opened the envelope, revealing hundreds of pages of documents. That's when she understood what I'd learned decades ago. Sometimes the only justice is revenge. Vincent stared at the papers, recognizing his own 27-year-old handwriting on the top page. "You want me to publish this?" "I want you to publish everything. Rebecca's evidence, Sarah's research, your eyewitness account of how Harrison Wolfe's spirit was broken while Hollywood's elite watched and laughed." Anna's voice hardened. "The same story you should have told in 1995. And if I refuse?" Anna glanced meaningfully at Lily. "Then your daughter inherits the choice, along with the consequences of your cowardice." The street around them seemed to hold its breath. Vincent could hear Lily's steady breathing beside him, could smell the grease and desperation wafting from the restaurant behind Anna. 27 years of running, of hiding, of telling himself that silence was survival, had led to this moment. "You're dying," he said suddenly, understanding flooding through him as he studied Anna's careful posture, the way she held herself like someone hoarding limited energy. "That's why now. That's why the rush." Anna's mask slipped for just an instant, revealing something raw underneath. "Pancreatic cancer. 6 months if I'm lucky." She straightened, rebuilding her composure with visible effort. "Harrison deserves justice before I join him. Rebecca deserves closure. And you, Vincent, deserve the chance to finally choose courage over cowardice." Vincent reached for the envelope, his hand trembling as his fingers closed around 27 years of buried truth. "Then, let's finish this." The envelope felt heavier than Vincent had expected, as if the weight of 27 years had somehow transferred into the paper itself. He tucked it inside his jacket, the bulk pressing against his ribs like a physical reminder of the choice he'd finally made. Anna Kaplan watched the gesture with satisfaction, but Vincent could see the effort it took her to remain upright. The cancer was eating away at more than just her body. It was consuming whatever time remained to see this through. "How long do I have?" he asked. "To publish, as long as it takes." Anna's voice carried a note of finality. "To live? That depends entirely on how quickly you move. There are people who will kill to keep this buried, Vincent. They've done it before." Lily stepped closer to her father. "What about protection? Witnesses?" "The best protection is speed. Publish everything simultaneously. Online, mainstream media, social networks. Make it impossible to contain." Anna reached into her coat again, producing a small USB drive, Rebecca's complete files. Bank records, internal studio memos, victim testimonies spanning 3 decades. Once it's public, killing Vincent becomes counterproductive. Vincent pocketed the drive. "And you? What happens to you in 6 months?" For the first time since they'd met, Anna's composure cracked completely. Her face contorted with something between grief and rage, and Vincent glimpsed the 27 years of obsession that had driven her to this moment. "I get to die knowing Harrison's story finally got told. That the bastards who destroyed him face consequences." She wiped her eyes roughly. "That's more peace than I expected when this started." She turned to walk away, then stopped. "Vincent, your wife knew she was dying when she contacted Rebecca. Sarah chose to spend her final months fighting for justice instead of wallowing in self-pity. Don't waste her sacrifice." Anna Kaplan disappeared into the shadows between buildings, leaving Vincent and Lily standing under the restaurant's flickering neon sign. The smell of grease and desperation had given way to something else. Possibility, maybe, or just the October wind carrying promises of change. They drove home in silence, the envelope and USB drive burning like secrets in Vincent's jacket. It wasn't until they were back in the cramped Chinatown apartment, surrounded by the detritus of his exile, that Vincent finally spoke. "I'm going to need help." Lily looked up from her laptop, where she'd already begun researching publication strategies. "I know. I've been making calls." Over the next 6 hours, Vincent's apartment transformed into a war room. Lily had contacted journalist friends, digital security experts, civil rights attorneys. By dawn, they had a plan. Simultaneous publication across multiple platforms, with legal protections in place and backup copies distributed to trusted sources. Vincent spent the morning reading through Rebecca Wolf's files, each document a fresh wound in Hollywood's carefully constructed facade. Bank records showing systematic payment disparities based on race, internal memos joking about difficult actors who demanded equal treatment. Security footage from dozens of premieres where powerful men humiliated, dismissed, or openly attacked performers of color while their colleagues watched in silence. And underneath it all, his own 27-year-old words describing Harrison Wolf's destruction. "I watched a man's spirit break in real time, witnessed the exact moment when dreams turned to ash in his eyes. And I did nothing, because doing something would have required a courage I didn't possess." The story went live at 3:17 p.m., the exact time Sarah had recorded her final video message. Vincent published his original account alongside Rebecca's evidence and Sarah's research, weaving 3 generations of investigation into a comprehensive indictment of an industry built on silence and complicity. Within hours, his phone was ringing constantly. News outlets, fellow journalists, investigators who'd been working similar cases for years. The story had touched something larger than Vincent had imagined, a network of buried truths finally surfacing. That evening, as Los Angeles burned with scandal and Vincent's cramped apartment filled with reporters, he found himself thinking about Harrison Wolf, about the man who died broken and forgotten while his tormentors prospered, about Sarah, who'd fought for justice even as cancer consumed her, about Anna Kaplan, spending her final months orchestrating a reckoning 27 years in the making. Lily brought him tea, the same jasmine blend Sarah had favored during her last weeks. "Ma would be proud," she said quietly. Vincent nodded, feeling something he hadn't experienced since 1995, the weight of truth finally spoken aloud. It didn't erase his cowardice or bring back the dead, but it offered something he'd almost forgotten was possible. Redemption. Outside, the October wind carried the scent of change through Chinatown's narrow streets. Vincent Chen, 62, former exile, sat in his apartment watching the career-ending story he should have written 27 years ago finally reshape the world. And for the first time in decades he felt like the man his wife had married, flawed, late to courage, but finally, irrevocably awake. The silence was broken. The rest would follow.